So today is going to be a little bit of a technical session. Now, I love what Barry said, where he called it the money slide, where the difference between a formal process and ad hoc really was where the money is. This is a little bit about process and how to be formalized. So we're talking about the decision criteria in a complex sale. And again, I think Chris said something like 53% of reps in their forecast on the committed side didn't come through, right? So let me ask you for a second to go to chat, because I want to ask you a question. You can just type a yes or no answer. Have you ever been told you lost a deal, while at the same time they were telling you you lost the deal, they told you the reason why you lost the deal? Have you ever been told you lost the deal? Yep, yes is everywhere. I saw Mike Norton's name. Nice to see you, Mike. Absolutely. So here's the bad news. If you were being told the reason why you lost the deal as you lost the deal, they never wanted you to win. You were outsold, right? If they told you the reason why you were losing as they were telling you you were losing, they didn't want you to win. You were outsold. So I want to bring some rigor to today. I want to give you another yes or no. Love it, Brian. We were outplayed. I want to give you another yes, dual choice question. In the sales process, do you think you should be a country doctor? What I mean by that is nurturing, relationship-oriented, curious, inquisitive, empathetic, understanding, a good questioner? Or do you think you ought to be a New York City surgeon, precise, maybe even abrupt, direct? What do you think? Just give me a word. Country doctor, both I'm seeing, haha. Yeah, I think the answer is going to be both, but I want to give you, the folks who said both, I want to give you the specific place where you will be able to see where you convert from country doctor to New York City surgeon. So I've got a couple of goals today. With Barry's follow-on, I want to talk about more rigorous qualification, which increases forecast accuracy, increases win rates, decreases showstoppers and finding out showstoppers at the last minute, differentiating yourself from the competition, and then ultimately getting your prospect to sell themselves. And so here's what I'm going to need from you. I want you to listen with a very disciplined ear or eye on what are the gaps in your current sales process, especially as we move from understanding discovery and their pain into the budget step or the investment step. And then I want you to make some decisions about what you'll change. I'm going to do a couple of workshop exercises where you'll only get a minute, which is not enough time, to begin to make some decisions on what you'll incorporate in your worlds. And then finally, like Dave Matson said at the beginning, I want you to commit to your version of the talk track. So that's where we are. Here's one more question for you. You can answer it if you like on chat. How do you know when you're in control of the sales process? How do you know when you're in control of the sales process? Let's get one or two answers and we'll hit it up. Talking time, maybe. Customers talking more, maybe. Yep, when they're doing most of the talking. So I'm going to give you a different answer. Here's what I see. You're in control of the process when you're the one making a specific suggestion about the next step, and they comply to that. Just because you're in control doesn't mean you win the sale. I can be completely in control when I ask about budget and they say, I have none. Can you ever find any? No. Can you find someone who can find some? No. I'm still in control of the sales process, but I may not win the sale. So you're in control when you're the one being more specific about recommending the next step, and they follow that. So let me give you a quick overview here on the Sandler system, which you've seen. So this is super quick. I'm going to give you the objectives of each. Where you see the arrows, we're going to talk about that thin line between pain and budget. So as you know, bonding is all about establishing an environment of trust, comfort, credibility, connection. As Dave Matson said, equal business stature. This is an equal business stature talk. Upfront contracts are about setting ground rules for that relationship in a couple of specific areas, like how much time do we have? What's our agenda specifically? What are the decisions we're looking to make at the end of today's meeting or our next step? Pain, of course, is discovery, uncovering through multiple stakeholders. What are the compelling personal and emotional reasons that would commit a buyer or a set of buyers to take action? And budget I love the word investment, but investment is really about understanding, are they willing and able to make any and all investments to be able to move forward? Decision process, of course, is getting a complete and accurate understanding of that decision-making process, including what's their timeline, what would be driving that timeline, what are the consequences of missing it, is doing nothing an option? How does the paperwork move through the organization? What are the milestones? Who's involved? What criteria are people using along the way? What are the showstoppers? And if we do that well, we can set up an upfront contract to move to fulfillment, right? Where our goal, again, is not only to present our solution specifically in line with pain, budget, and decision, but get a yes or no answer, and then ultimately move to post-sale, where we can not only make sure there are no backouts and the competitor doesn't sneak back in, but we set up the ground rules for a long-term relationship. So I'm looking for this. Today is about that small gap between pain and budget, or the investment. And so one of the models you may have seen if you've been in Sandler for a while is something called the painometer, right? And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but I want to uncover all of their key issues and challenges and wants and goals and objectives. But more importantly, I want to prioritize them. I want to get them talking about them. I want specific examples because that makes them emotional. I want to understand from a business acumen standpoint how it impacts the organization. What might they be losing or gaining? How it impacts the stakeholders? Is there a commitment level? Is there some consensus to take some action? As Barry talked about, so many deals not closing. And you're right, Alexi, it is not always linear. The one I want to focus on is once we've done a good job on discovery, and Alexi, that might take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 calls with multiple decision makers. Ultimately, I want to help uncover what's their vision of the solution. In the ideal world, what would you hope me, John, Sandler, what would you hope we do for you? And so that happens at the end of pain, not at the beginning. If you walk in and say, what are you hoping I do for you? They go, well, I don't even know what you do. But if you do it at the right time, after bonding, right? Yeah, by the way, don't worry too much about pain. You should never really be using the word pain in front of a prospect. I don't ever say, so what are your pains? What's keeping you up at night? I mean, there are more sophisticated ways to do that, but assuming for a moment you did a good job to sort of figure out what's driving it. Now it's time to understand their vision of a solution and then really control the process. Most salespeople jump from pain or problem or needs or wants, right? You name it, into solutions. This is where we've got control. I'm going to give you some talk tracks. I'm going to model it, right? So I'm going to slow down the role play speed. Once I get their vision, I'm going to start my transition from country doctor to surgeon. Because again, once someone has been diagnosed to some degree, I want to be confident I've got someone who can fix it. And so here's what the talk track sounds like in hopefully slower tones, modeling it. Ms. Prospect, would it be helpful if I sort of share with you big picture how you and I would typically engage? And here's what I find. If we don't agree big picture, it may not even make sense to go down the road and talk details. Would that be helpful? So this is a little mini upfront contract that I think of as an easy on-ramp to the budget step, to the investment step, as opposed to, do you have a budget set aside? And I'm going to look to qualify you in two areas, conceptually and technically. The first part is conceptually. So would it be helpful, Ms. Prospect, if I shared with you a couple of our core philosophies, how we typically work, what it would look like to engage, big picture? Because if we don't agree big picture, it may not make sense to sort of jump into the details. Would that work for you? Absolutely. And let me get your feedback on each of these. And then we can decide together if it makes sense to continue. So again, those 3 slides together are nice little mini upfront contracts. In 28 years of teaching Sandler, I have never had anybody say, no, I don't want to do that. So once you get that vision of solution, would it be helpful if I shared with you a little bit more in depth as to how we would work together, maybe share a couple of core philosophies, how we work big picture? Because one of the things I understand, if we don't agree big picture, it may not make sense to talk details. So let me share with you a couple of key philosophies, get your feedback on each of these, and then you and I can decide if it makes sense to continue. Fair enough? Fair enough, John. Now, here's what a good philosophy is. A good philosophy not only qualifies the buyer, because we want good customers, good clients, but it does differentiate you as well. And it also gives the prospect the opportunity to sell themselves. Let me give you a couple of examples. In my world, and I'll give you two other worlds that are not my world. Would it be helpful, Jim, if I shared with you a little bit as to what it would look like if you and I had a chance to engage, our teams had a chance to work together? Sure, John, sure. And I'm thinking, let me share with you some core philosophies, big picture. Because in my experience, if we don't agree big picture, it may not make sense to talk details. Fair, fair. And let me get your feedback on each of these, and then we can decide if it makes sense to continue. Absolutely. Out of role play, notice the subtle change I'm going to put in place to go to New York City surgeon. Back and roll. Jim, our first philosophy is you are the leader of the sales organization. You got 3 sales managers, you got 21 salespeople. Your participation is not optional. Should we stop? By the way, you might have noticed a little bit of edge to that one, right? A little bit more surge in. Typically, you will hear, by the way, if it's a problem, if there's going to be a problem, you want to uncover it anyway. Typically, you might hear, no, that makes sense. I was expecting on participating. And this is part of the magic. To be able to say, no, Jim, I understand that makes sense, but help me understand in your view why that's so important, why your participation is so important. Boy, and they will sell themselves. They will go through all these wonderful reasons, some of which you didn't even have in your pitch deck. And people care much more about themselves than you. So get that feedback. Here's another example of the one we'll use. Jim's second philosophy is, let me tell you what we're not. What we're not is a 1, 2, 3-day seminar program where we get your folks all excited and jumping up and down, and they learn great stuff, but nothing ever changes. We're about long-term, ongoing, reinforcement-based training, small batches of time over longer lengths of time. I got clients with me 27 years. I'm not saying it's you, but is that a showstopper? No, I love the idea of reinforcement training. All right, let's slow it down. Work me through your thinking. Why do you think that's so crucial here? And they give you examples. I'll give you one more example that I'm going to have you work on yours. Let's say you're a software company and you did a great job on discovery. Thanks, Deb. You did a great job on discovery. And now you're going to move in. And here's what it'll sound like. And I'll use Deb's name because she was nice. So Deb, let me share with you a couple of philosophies, same setup. So here's our first philosophy. Our software is wonderful. It's in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. It's rated best in the industry. And you know what, Deb? It's not about the software. I know it sounds crazy. It really is about some of the work that needs to be done pre-installation, pre-implementation, some of the training, and a lot that needs to be done post-implementation. Now, in order to do that, what I'm going to need from you is a commitment from you and your team for time to invest in that training and invest in that implementation program. So a good philosophy, out of role play, a good philosophy is not only a differentiation, but it requires, and I want you to make a note on this, it requires a commitment or an investment from that prospect. It requires, I don't want to just say, hey, let me tell you the good news. We're ongoing training and it's great, because nobody learns anything if it's not ongoing. It requires a commitment from the buyer. So very quickly, I can give you like a minute, not even a minute, 30 seconds, but begin to think through what might be, this is your homework, but what might be a philosophy. In construction companies, sometimes they have a greater process for pre-construction. Other places do a great job on assessments. Whatever it is, you want to think, what's your real differentiator? And then turn that differentiator on its head and think through not only what's the philosophy, but what kind of investments are required from the prospect as an ideal customer to be able to make that work. It's a commitment to change. Yep. And without it, you're likely sunk. So I recommend 2, 3, maximum, maybe 4 core philosophies. And by the time you're done, not only do they see you differentiated, not only have you put a little bit of that New York City surgeon on, but you certainly have elevated posture and equal business stature. They have sold themselves, as Brandon has said. And they're more eager to do business with you. And now is the time to start qualifying technically. So once we agree conceptually on my philosophies, I still have to qualify you. And here's what that sounds like. Now that we're on the same page conceptually, Jane, and I appreciate that, do you think it would be helpful if we talk through more specifically the kinds of investments that you and your team and your organization may need to make? If we did decide to work together, would that be helpful? They all say yes. You don't need 3, but I'll typically say, I find there are 3 things. And for now, you're going to see in a moment, but I'm going to do a role play where you see financial, time, and access. I find there are 3 things. Certainly one is the financial side of things, Jane. Is it budgeted? Who releases that budget? What's the criteria you use to decide whether or not it makes sense to bring a project aboard, for instance? There's a time commitment. The time that I'll need from you as a sponsor, the time I'll need from your team, the time that we'll need for our teams to work together. And there's an access to the right people who are both impacted and the right information for the people who are impacted and involved along the way. So I can understand the timeline and I can understand sort of how it impacts some of the key stakeholders. Comfortable talking through that? Absolutely. Because the last thing I want to do is you and I and your team head down this path where it becomes clear to you that we are the right solution, which is tremendous. And then we get to the end, only for you to discover that you can't move forward because of one of those 3 things, the finances, the time, or the access, and then you're frustrated. And I want to help you avoid that. Fair? Fair. They all agree. By the way, in code, you know what I said in code? In code, I said this: I have very little patience to get to the end of the sales process to have you tell me one of these are disqualifiers. If it's going to be disqualified, let's talk about it early. So there's a lot of things you can use. I call it the investment triangle. It doesn't need to be 3, but I love a pencil cell. If it's virtual, I draw this out on a whiteboard. It doesn't need to be finance, access, and time. It could be finance, time, access. It could be political capital. Are they willing and able to invest their political capital to champion the cause? It could be, are they willing and able to actually fire their incumbent? How many times do things get unhooked because they're truly at the end unwilling? Are they willing to undergo, if need be, any disruption or change? Anything that I can hear at the end, I want to bring to the beginning. I want to remove that barrier. And I want to see, sir, if they feel like it's absolutely worth it. And so when I put that mini upfront contract in place, now that we're on the same page conceptually, and it feels like there's a fit in working together, does it make sense if we talk a little bit about some of the key investments that you and your team would need to make if we do decide to move forward? Absolutely, John. And I typically find there are 3. There's a financial side. Now notice in the financial side, in all of these, notice in finance, I gave preview questions. I said, we'll talk about the finances. Things like, is this project funded or budgeted? Who releases that budget? What kind of criteria do you use to decide, is there a return on investment and is the best use of your funds? The beautiful thing about previewing questions is it makes it so much easier. They've already agreed to answer those questions. So when you say, so help me understand, is this particular initiative funded? Heck, there's no challenges there. So a couple things I want you to think about. What are your key investment areas, right? Just jot them down. I can't give you more than 30 seconds and it's homework, but jot them down. What are your key investments? Is it firing the current supplier? Is it political capital from a coach or a champion? Is it space, if you need space? Is it access to the executives? Take a moment to think not only what are the kinds of investments, but for every single one, you need to be thinking about It is switching friction. I'm going to steal that, Chase. That's a great one-liner. You've got to be thinking about giving them preview questions, because preview questions, I think it's switching friction, lowers that barrier, right? Lowers that barrier, and then allows you to have a seamless, conversational, strong business acumen talk business person to business person about the investment criteria in a complex sale. Now, this is, you might need to do this multiple times with multiple stakeholders. No worries. Thanks, Wayne. So a couple things to think about. Listen, in the end, you and your customer want the same thing. You want them to have the absolute best solution. If that's not you, you ought to walk away. You want the same thing. Now, again, just as Barry talked about, supposedly the buyer doesn't want to see you, but if you can bring value and you can bring posture and you can bring equal business stature, it makes some sense. So elevate your posture. Play the game to win. Don't play it not to lose. So many, I mean, anybody who's watched American football have seen, the prevent defense, which too often has prevented a win. So play the game to win, not to lose. Inspire confidence by bringing some of that surgeon in. Bring on ideal clients. Overachieve what you even thought was possible. Make an impact. Make an impact. And then ultimately, through the work that you do, change the world, because that's the business we're in, changing the world. Mike, I think we're all square. A couple things for homework. A, jot down, I can't have you share it, jot down one lesson learned. 5 seconds of courage, love it, Sarah. One lesson learned. Write down your wow. Wow stands for within 1 week. What's something you're going to do within 1 week, next business week? And then write down one person that you're going to teach these concepts to. If you want to own it, you got to teach it. You got to teach it to 3 to 5 people over the next 2 weeks if you want to own it. Michael, pass the recording on. You can watch the recording numerous times. Model it. Find your footing. Find your voice. Change the world. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it, Mike.